Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Down at the Dock. We're going to continue our discussion on power management, so if you've not had a chance to check out our previous video on power management, you might want to hit pause and go do that now and then come back to this video. So continuing on, we like to anchor a lot, and when you're on anchor, all you have are your house battery banks, your solar panel, and your engine to charge up all the utilities that you use. So, time for full confession. One summer of using our boat, we murdered our house battery bank. And we committed a double homicide, which I'll go over here briefly. So, this right here is a screen that you hope to never see in your chart plotter. Low voltage alarm of 10.8 volts. So, we said, hey, let's go ahead and test the batteries, and figured, there's two batteries. What's the chances of both of them actually failing? So we figured it's probably just the one. So we went ahead and we jumpered out the middle battery, as you can see right up here. And then we went and ran the test. Now, these are deep cycle batteries, so you can't really put like a battery tester on them, because a battery tester is going to tell you voltage and it's going to tell you cold cranking amps. Deep cycle batteries are low on the cold cranking amps, and they're meant for deep cycle applications, so the only real way to test them is to actually use them. So we sat down here on the boat at the dock, disconnected shore power, and we just ran normal loads of about 10 amps. Had the chart plotter going, we had the radio going, and it took all of about 30 minutes, and we went from 12.8 volts to 12.6 volts to 10 volts or less. So I said, aha, it's got to be this battery. But since I was already here, I'd already pulled out the battery tray halfway. I thought, since I see the first battery there is failed, let's do the same test on the second battery just to double check. So I connected the middle battery back together on the negative, and then I went ahead and jumpered out the sternmost battery, ran the test again, and 30 minutes on this battery, and we were back to 9.75 volts. So I was like, both batteries are toast. So what's interesting on this is the Victron display. It's showing consumed amp hours is almost 4 amp hours, and I'm at 9.75 volts. Anything below 10.5 is going to be a dead battery. Only getting 4 amp hours out of the battery before you get to 9.9 volts is also a red flag that the deep cycle is not giving you a deep cycle out of the charge. And running at 10 amps and 100 watts is not an unreasonable load to expect. So this confirmed my suspicion that both my house batteries were in fact dead and in need of replacement. Right? It wouldn't necessarily be a warranty thing, because I did this to myself. Right? I just used the batteries too hard. Obviously, I took the batteries too deep for of a charge of where they should be. For the majority of the time of using these batteries, I did not have a battery monitor. I was just relying on the Garmin voltage, which is not very accurate. Not because of the Garmin, but because when you read voltage of a battery and you're consuming from that battery, the consumption is going to cause the voltage to be low anyway. So to actually get a true reading on a battery, you need to disconnect everything from the battery, let it sit for a day, and then take a voltage reading. And that's just not practical to do when you're at sea. So basically, we were anchoring blind and ended up killing both of our batteries. So we said, all right, they obviously need to be replaced. So we went shopping for replacement batteries. I could have done the same universal batteries that the boat came with, but I thought I really need more capacity. Having that second cockpit refrigerator costs me quite a bit more on electrical. So when I worked the math out through my spreadsheet, what I found was that with the cockpit fridge and the cabin refrigerator and the anchor light, that's going to consume about 70% of my house bank in a 24-hour period. So that only leaves me 30% left to turn on light switches, run the heater, run the radio. That didn't seem like enough, so I was like, well, to do lithium ion is a pretty big delta. With what you have to change out. Your battery charger might have to be changed. For your alternator, you'd have to have a DC to DC charger. Your solar panel charger would have to support lithium-ion batteries. Just an enormous amount of work would go into that. I didn't want to do any of that. I wanted to stick with the AGM stuff if possible, but get like a better quality battery. So with Firefly batteries, what I found was instead of an absorbed glass mat, they use a a carbon foam that resists corrosion and sulfation. And my attraction to these batteries was that the manufacturer says you can run them, they recommend that you run them down to 80% depth of discharge. They say you can actually run them to 100% depth of discharge, and they say you can do that 600 to 800 times. To put this in comparison, conventional AGM batteries, if you run them to 100% depth of discharge, you'll probably kill them, which is probably what I did to both my house batteries, in all honesty. But to be able to do that 600 to 800 times, that's a huge safety net to me, which means if I had to get to 100%, I'm not gonna kill my batteries. They're still gonna recover. But 80% is really what the target is, and that gives me an additional 20% capacity for the same two batteries that I already had, for the same space I was already given. All I've done is replaced two G31 batteries with another two G31 batteries for 20% more capacity, and I can cycle those batteries down to 80% up to 1,300 times per the manufacturer's expected life expectancy. That's going to be about twice the number of cycles that conventional AGM does, with 20% more capacity, and not have to change anything else in the boat. That was hugely attractive to me. Now the batteries are about twice the cost, but I was like, all right, so I paid twice as much for the battery. I got twice the lifespan of the battery, and I get 20% more capacity through the life of that. That made this a worthwhile investment for me. So I went down and picked up a couple of these batteries. I don't recommend that you buy these on Amazon. They want $125 shipping, so I found a place in Seattle that actually has them in stock, and just drove down there and picked them up. And that way I didn't have to pay the exorbitant shipping charges. The batteries do weigh about 75 pounds a piece. So I pulled the two universal batteries out. That's them right here. And this is the battery tray that they went in. So this tray has three batteries on it. Two screws hold the starboard down, and you just slide it straight out. But it's still got a little over 200 pounds on this, so it's a bit tough to move out, and especially hard to put back in. So pulled the two house batteries out. Then I ended up with all of these connections that I then had to remember what goes where. Fortunately, everything is labeled. Ranger does a really good job at labeling the ends of the cable. So put the two Fireflies in, got everything all tidied up nice and neat, looked really good. And I went to slide the battery tray forward back where it was, and I couldn't move it. 200 pounds on that tray, I just couldn't do it. And I was like, I don't want to work that hard. So I says, I'm good with the batteries being right where they're at. Let me just go ahead and leave them here, and I'll just shut the hatch. Well, I went to shut the hatch, and with these cables all laying on top, the hatch wouldn't shut. It'd get about an inch above, and it wouldn't shut. So I was like, phooey, I can't get the hatch to shut. I don't want to push the batteries all forward. What do I do now? And I said, what if I moved them? What if I just moved the batteries, right? So I got some battery boxes, and I started playing with ideas. Says, I could live with this. We don't use this cockpit storage area for all that much. Primarily, we store our inflatable dinghy down here. This cockpit space looks really big on the showroom floor, is what we found, but practicality of getting in and out of it, you pretty much have to clear the entire cockpit out to be able to open this hatch. And our cockpit has almost always got crab pots, shrimp pots, stuff on it, which makes it problematic to get in and out of. So I was like, maybe moving them is the right thing to do. So we said, all right. We made up a sketch and said, what would it take to actually do the move? So I started with this and said, if I got the two new batteries, we're here in the cockpit, what would I do to extend the house loads and the negative to get it back where the batteries are going to be? And I said, well, that's pretty up the drawing. So I created this. And I listed a bunch of objectives of what I wanted to solve by doing this, right? So the first one was to remove all the unnecessary cables from the positive and negative battery posts for the house and thruster battery bank. That's this right here. Every time you go to change batteries out, you got to remember what cables go where as they all come over. Then you have to fight all these cables as you move the batteries in and out. I was like, I don't want to work that hard. Batteries are not going to last forever. They're going to be replaced, and it's going to be me replacing them. They're also heavy, and I just didn't want to work that hard replacing them, and I don't want to have to swear a lot when I replace the batteries either. So I said, next thing I wanted all future battery replacements to be easy for the house and thruster batteries. 15 minutes or less to swap the batteries is all it should really take. We've also got an issue with a port list on the boat. We've got 2 refrigerators, the kicker, and 3 batteries all on the port side. No wonder it lists to the port. It's just sitting at the dock. You can notice we see the port list. And when we're cruising at less than 10 knots, we can feel the port list, and the trim tabs don't help you at slow speed. So we wanted to do anything we can move from port to center line weight-wise would be beneficial. We wanted also to configure the house bank with both batteries for equal discharge and charge. That means the positive, when you hook the 2 batteries in parallel, the positive charge should come out of one battery and the negative should come out of the opposite battery. That way it forces both batteries to charge and discharge equally. That way they will both last as long as possible and they'll both fail about the same time. And we wanted to put the house batteries into a battery box in case there's any electrolyte leakage. This is really nice to have. AGM batteries are sealed batteries, so they should not leak. They do vent, so it is possible for them to leak. And because they're in electrolyte, boxes, the boxes need to be secured to the boat. I can't just drill a hole in the bottom of the box, because then if electrolyte ever did leak, then it would leak out of the box with the hole in the bottom of the box. So I had to build a little wooden frame and put in some ratchet tie-down straps to secure the batteries to the bottom of the boat. Batteries being 75 pounds, you don't want them to move around ever. Not even if you're in 3 to 5 foot seas like we've unfortunately been in. You want these batteries to stay put. Right. And also, this is a really good drawing to illustrate how the Victron battery monitor shunt works too, as well. I've got the shunt right here. So effectively, what I did was, I said all the positive and negative for the house battery banks live in the port lazarette, and they pretty much live in the sternmost or the middle position is where the cable lengths were all already cut to length. I didn't want to have to change anything in the boat that I didn't have to. I basically just wanted to put an extension cord from this spot and run it into the cockpit lazarette. So I went and we installed a power bus bar for positive and negative, and all the battery cables that were already here just attached to the bus bars. And then for the bus bars, I just had a 4/0, red and yellow cable, we call it an extension cord, out to where the batteries are. Overall, it's about 6 foot of a run for the positive, and the negative's about 11 foot. I had to custom cut the cables to length, so I bought them a little bit long. And I did all 4/0 cabling just to make sure I don't have any issues with capacity and whatnot. I added a 350 amp fuse to cover the extra cable that I did add. Should that cable ever short, hopefully it doesn't. Fuses have to be A&L because it's ignition protected, because it is a gasoline powered boat. So with the Fireflies, the one thing I like is I'll get, instead of 99 amp hours, which is what I had on the previous set of batteries, I'll get 143 usable on the Fireflies for the exact same 2 batteries. And if I have to go higher than 143 and take the batteries to 0 on occasion, I'm not going to permanently damage these batteries. So we spent a day, went shopping. Here's the 600 amp power bus bar. Here's the negative bus bar, the power post I did for the thruster battery. These are the tie down hooks for the battery tie downs. Some lugs, some 4/0 lugs I had to use. A bunch of tools. So then we got to work. Spent a whole day doing the actual conversion. So I went and measured out where I wanted the boxes to be, drew some lines on the starboard, cut some wood to frame it in with where the batteries were going to be. Pulled the starboard up, ran the through bolts in with backing plates for the ratchet tie down straps for each of the 2 batteries. And then sat the boxes and the batteries in center cockpit where they need to go. And at this point, then it's just a matter of running the cable over to them. So here's organized chaos. All the tools all over, as in, running the cable and stuff. Most of it is not seen because it runs up underneath here and up and around, and all the work is actually done over in the port lazarette. This is what the negative bus bar looks like installed. This is the shunt that's installed for the negative. So it shows all the negative return for the house bank has to go through here to get an accurate reading. And so that you've got your two negatives, obviously. These two red wires, one of them goes to the house battery for voltage. The other one goes to my thruster battery for voltage, just to get a voltage reading off of those. And then this gray cable in the back, it's like an RJ45 or RJ11 connector that plugs in. That's the actual cable that, and you can see it right here, that runs into the galley that goes to the Victron monitor. This is the positive cable that comes out of the battery. This is the fuse box that I put in, 350 amp A&L. That's actually the gas tank right here, which is why it's got to be ignition protected. All right, and fortunately, because the way the cables ran, I didn't have to actually drill a hole through the bulkhead. There was enough room up here that I could just run it forward around the corner, and the power bar is about right here on the other side of this bulkhead. So once the batteries are all wired up and cabled, so I've cleaned up the cable terminals, because now all I have are positive and negative connections for the batteries. I don't have any extra things connected to the battery terminals. This will make replacement of the batteries super easy. I just got to pull out the two positive and negative lugs, pull the cables off, pull the batteries out, drop a new battery in, retighten them, and I'm done. I highlighted here the actual cabling. This is for equal discharge and charge of the batteries to show, because it's hard to see how I trace the cables here, but technically, they're put in parallel, so that's negative to negative and positive to positive. And then from the boat, I take the positive closest, right, because I want the positive to be the shortest cable possible to go to the loads, and then the return is the longer cable that takes a long way around to the starboard battery. And this way, the positive comes out the port, and the negative return goes into the starboard, and that'll balance the batteries as far as electrical charge goes, so that they both charge and discharge equally. And then also the tie-down straps, I ordered these online. They're stainless steel, and I got carbina clips on them, so that even if the boat was bumping or something, there's no chance for that clip to actually pop off. Right? I mean, if we're in 3 to 5 foot seas, if the boat's sideways, I don't want these batteries falling around or moving around at all. So this is the finished look of the batteries. So one thing I liked also is I've got my forward bilge pump. There's actually two bilge pumps in the cockpit storage. There's one forward and one aft. You can't see the one that's aft in here. But the forward one, I still need to get to that in case it gets clogged to be able to clean it. So I still maintain easy access to the bilge pump, and I got my port and starboard batteries equally balanced, center line on the boat. Easy access to them. So the thruster battery, got it all tucked back away. So I moved the thruster battery, which used to be about 1.5 feet forward, as far away as you could get to it. So I moved it to the sternmost position where one of the house batteries used to be. This makes easy maintenance on the thruster battery. I also cleaned the cables up on this one. I just installed a power post. I didn't have to do a full-blown power bar for this, just a power post, because there's only about 4 or 5 connections on the positive side of the thruster battery. So this makes it easier if I have to change the thruster battery. I won't even have to pull the white board out anymore. All I got to do is disconnect the battery, and you can just pick it up right out of there, and it's just 2 screws, one for the positive, one for the negative. And all my hatches shut now, right? So hallelujah. So then we went and did some testing. So first thing we did was we went and charged the Fireflies, make sure they're fully charged. This is what it will look like on your Victron with a set of fully charged batteries. 13.58 volts, which is float voltage, and everything is all zeros because you're not consuming anything, you're not using it, you're not charging it. So then I turned around and I had a little, it was like a 600 watt ceramic portable space heater in the boat we used to keep the boat warm during the winter here. And I was like, well, I'll just turn the inverter on and I'll run that. So I disconnected from shore power, turned on the inverter, and then ran that portable space heater. And it was drawing almost 74 amps, call it almost 900 watts. I ran this for a couple of minutes, and it just ran. The voltage obviously dropped from 12.8 down to 12.0 volts, but it hovered at 12 volts, didn't fluctuate, it just stayed steady, and it just ran that heater. The inverter didn't beep, it didn't alarm, it didn't shut off, it just worked. So here's the picture when I turn the heater off. Voltage dropped back up, popped back up to 12.7 volts. Everything was fine there. Current was at 3 volts, and I saw 39 watts of usage, 1.8 amp hours consumed. This is pretty normal. I'll see, the 39 or 40 watts pretty much when the 2 refrigerators are just at idle and nothing else is really using the boat. Like when I walk down to the boat, we disconnect from shore power. This is usually what I'll end up seeing as far as usage goes. And if you look here, the starter battery, which is actually the thruster battery, is at 12.8 volts with the house bank at 12.7. This lets me know that the ACRs have actually isolated the 2 batteries, which is exactly what they should do. All right, but it's really nice having that thruster battery voltage available, so at least I can see what it looks like. I wish Victron would let me change the name of this from starter battery to whatever I want it to be, but they don't let you do that. If the refrigerators are actually turned off, like I pull the fuses on them, or they just don't need to be ran because they go on a periodic cycle of whether they're running or not, this is what the Victron would look like. So the boat pulls 9 watts. This is the background. I call it the baseline draw. It's basically the memory to the stereo, the USB ports with the little LED lights that they give off, the NEMA 2000 bus that connects everything together. All of that's about 2 watts a piece. And then I've got the Garmin GXM54 weather antenna. It pulls another 2 watts also. That's where I get up to about 9 watts. So normal loads, if I'm out on anchor, we run usually about 100 watts, maybe a little bit less. So that's about 8 amps total of a draw. So if you just look at this, I did some math to show you kind of how this equation works. So if they're 220 amp hour batteries, and we can use 80% of them, which is what Victron is using for its calculation, that would leave 176 hours. Now, I don't use the full, I don't consider the full 176 number. I look at the 143 amp hour number because the 143 it doesn't take into account the top 15% of the battery, because once I'm underway, the absorption phase, I don't count on being able to put the batteries back to 100%. But that aside, 176 amp hours. So if you take 176 amp hours, subtract the almost 5 amp hours that this is showing we've consumed, and then you divide that by how many amps we're currently running, which is 8, that comes up to 21 hours, and Victron is telling me I got 23 hours. So pretty close, right? Not too far off. And this time remaining, it's looking at an average of a period of time to adjust that. I've actually got mine set to 0, so it should be fairly instantaneous, but it's also got some other factors that it uses in there in its equation. But just to let you know, this is how it works. So like if I was sitting at anchor and I'm watching, my time remaining got down to like, 6 hours, and I wanted to go to bed, and I would see my consumed amp hours, at like, say it was like a negative 100, right, amp hours. Then I would go and charge the battery and then that consumed amp hours is going to go down, not up. So instead of being like a negative 100 amps, it might be negative 80 after you put 20 amps into it by running the engine. And then that will adjust the time remaining, and that's how I can charge the battery and get up to 80-85% and know that I don't need to go to 100 and I can stop. And this is the finished completed project. So I've got my 2 port and starboard house batteries in, all secured, ratchet tied down. That's my little Pally space heater in there. People ask that. I use that for the winter time. I plug that into the outlet that the grill uses. And it's got a fixed thermostat to keep the temperature at about 40-45 degrees. Just keeps my water pipes from freezing. I've got 3 water lines in here. There's the raw water suction from the boat, raw water wash down, the transom sink, and the transom shower. Then I don't want to have freeze. And the boat is now balanced. I got a crooked anchor, but sitting at the dock, it actually looks level sitting there instead of listing to port like it has since we've gotten it. And that's it. So this is how I moved our batteries. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please leave those in the comment section below. And again, thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Channel Surfing. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If so, please click the like and subscribe button. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section below. And don't forget to click the bell for notifications so you'll know as soon as we upload a video.
Thank you, and stay tuned for more channel surfing.